Jim Tonkin, man. Wow, the legend. You keep saying you're retired, but you keep popping up all over the place.
Well,
I'm retiring hard for you?
No, actually, it isn't. I'm not dead, as I kind of tell some people, because some people do retire and then 2 years later they're dead. And you feel bad for those folks.
Right.
I'd never want to be one of them. It took me 5 years to retire, guys. I started when I was 65, and every December I told my wife, I think I got it all set up, all the clients are good, and, I'll do some phone work and stuff, but I'm not traveling 300,000 miles anymore every year. And 65 went by, so every year until I was 69. And then I promised her in 2019, this is going to happen. It is. And she just puts her earplugs in. But then right after the first of the year, I had like 6 trips, 4 in January and 2 in the first 2 weeks of February. And I came home and of course, COVID started.
Right.
So it was almost like somebody was watching me out for me, because I was always afraid to take my fingernails out of the ceiling tiles. And COVID actually became my best friend, because I was Zooming 5 days a week.
Right.
I was probably on, TV, 5 hours a day, sometimes 6 hours. So it wasn't like I was really retired. But by the end of 2020, I just felt like, okay, call me if you want. Everybody has my number. They have my website. They have, and then eventually I turned all that off. I still kept my phone with my phone number, but I gave up Healthy Brand Builders website, the emails, all of the traffic stuff that people could
That's
find me
real
on.
retirement.
Could we have gotten that?
Yes.
Could we buy that?
I wish we had your contact.
And then also I did one other thing which was kind of interesting. LinkedIn is, I have a love-hate relationship, and you guys, I don't know how you feel about LinkedIn.
Never heard of it.
I love it.
You do. So I do happen to really like it. My big problem with it, and I've talked to the founders of LinkedIn numerous times about this, there's no adjudication of what you say on there. So I found lots of people, and I'm a fact checker. I like to get into science and stuff. So when somebody has a profile up there and they talk about who they are and what they did, and I found out there's like 4 out of 8 things are BS.
Yeah.
That ticks me off. And it doesn't mean I'm not still going to be their friend, or they may be a client.
That's not just LinkedIn, though. That's America. And that's the world. I mean, but I agree with you,
Yeah.
So I love LinkedIn. I committed to it like a year ago. Dino laughs at me. But I'm like sick of myself posting right now. But it works, and it's a great way to communicate. We've gotten a ton of business out of it.
Oh, that's great.
So real quick, I know your career goes way back, and I want to go back and hear all about it. But I'm going to tell you when we first met you, and then Dino's going to tell the real story that had a huge impact on us. Oh. So the first time I heard your name was I was employee number 1 at Icelandic Glacial. Dino was employee number 2, and Pat was employee number 3. And we didn't know at the time, but you were negotiating a deal with Anheuser-Busch to make a crazy investment in the brand, pre-revenue, basically.
Yeah.
And so that's how your name first popped up. That's when we first heard about you. We didn't really know you, but we tried to get to know you. And then there was one moment that Dino tells the story way better than I do. So Dino, you tell it.
So I've told Jim this story a bunch of times, so I'm sort of not telling it for Jim's benefit. I'm sort of telling it for the benefit of our audience, because Danny and I believe in moments. Like, there's definitely pivotal moments around your life, like the day you met your wife, or the day you did this or that.
You're comparing the day you met your wife to the day you met Jim Tonkin?
As far as the impact it had on my life, it's close.
Wow.
It's close.
I hope Nancy's not listening.
I wouldn't say it's a 1 and 1A situation, but it's definitely a 1 top 5 situation.
Thank you. I'm touched.
But,
and I've said that before.
Icelandic did what it did. It had a hard time in 2008. That's a struggle every brand has. And I'm so excited what they've been able to do with it and keep it going. But at the end of 2008, it looked like it was finished. Danny and I had to let go of 50 people. And we went from being employees number 1 and 2 to 1 through 58, and then we were back down to 8, and I was like, ooh, this doesn't look good. We wanted to start our own business, but we had no money and no good ideas. One is kind of forgivable, one's not.
Yeah.
And the only asset we had is we knew a lot of people, we thought at the time, as far as retail buyers and stuff like that. So we were going to start LA Libations. We go to Kinko's, we print business cards. They were still wet, I think, when we got to Expo West. And we were too cheap to buy a pass.
Well, we didn't even know what Expo West was. I mean...
Well, we've been there with Jan and Christian before, because I'd been there with Icelandic for a couple of years, so we knew it was definitely a show to go check out.
Right, yeah.
So you were kind enough to give us some badges because in those days they didn't check ID. Shout out to the people
true.
at Expo West. They got smarter.
Yep.
But Danny and I snuck in with these badges, and we must have looked like frickin' frack. I mean, in those days, we were both big boys, and we were wearing suits that really didn't fit very well. And Jim came out and gave us these badges, and we walked through Expo West. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't think so at the time, but in hindsight, I think we were too cool for school. We walked around with our noses stuck up and said, well, this brand, what are these guys doing, right? Because we still reeked of Coca-Cola. We still reeked of Anheuser-Busch. Sure. And we thought, well, this was fun. Okay, let's go have lunch, right? And we texted you or got a hold of you and said, hey, we're ready to give the badges back. And you were puzzled. I remember hearing your voice. You were like, what, did something happen? Like, no, we're ready to go. We've seen it all, right? We've been here 2 hours, Jim.
Yeah, oof.
And you said, okay, I'll meet you outside by the fountain, right? And rather than just take the badges and go back inside, which would have been way more efficient for you, you said, can I talk to you boys a minute? You guys want to sit down? And you're not old enough to be my dad, but my dad still doesn't know what the fuck I do. He's like, he asks me sometimes, he's like, what? And you guys do what? And they pay you for that, But you know exactly what we do. And you kind of sat us down and really gave us kind of like a fatherly thing. Like our business was 4 weeks old.
Yeah.
And you were like, guys, in 2 hours, you can't see all of Expo West. You can't have more than 2 good conversations in 2 hours. There's no way you went down every single aisle. There's no way you handed out 300 business cards. Like, there's just no way.
Yeah, 3,200. There's that many exhibitors there.
Right. No, and you were real honest with us. You said, guys, I kind of went out of my way to create an opportunity for you because I'm cheering for you, and I'm watching you fuck it up. Like, this is, if you guys are going to take this stuff seriously, this is a business. Yeah. Like, how are you going to pay yourselves? How are you going to feed your employees? Mine will. I think we had 2 employees that we had to feed. Yeah. And you really kind of roughed us up and were kind enough to say, now, do you guys want these back? Do you want to go back in and try again? And I remember we said, well, yeah, I want it back. I want to go back in there.
Yeah.
And we went back in there. We spent 5 more hours. We handed out a bunch of business cards, and we really did it right. But we needed someone to wake us up and frankly, I wouldn't even call it tough love. You were really kind to us. And it put us on a path, and I never forget it because, our little business luckily did what it did, but it didn't have to, and it may not have, had you not kind of shaken us a little bit to say, nobody's writing you guys checks anymore. Yeah. Like, you guys are the ones writing checks to employees. And if
it was a big switch for you, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. The most beautiful part to me, and this is just kind of recent, because I remember that. And there are times in my life when I've given a lot of advice to people over the years, and I'll never stop doing that because I think when you get older, you have hopefully a bigger collection of wisdom and experiences, both good and bad. You've had failures, you've had successes, and you guys did such a good job at the Beverage Forum, which just concluded yesterday.
What did you call it? You gave it a new nickname?
The Beverage Forum.
No, what did you call it? Expo?
Oh, no. It'll come to me in a minute.
I quickly trademarked it. It was Expo Best.
That's it. Expo Best.
Beverage Forum, a.k.a. Expo Best.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a good trademark.
So just like Inch Wide, Mile Deep, I also copyrighted that in 1983, and everybody stole it, but that's okay. So when I went to Expo West this year in March, somebody invited me to come over for dinner, and I really wasn't going to come. And I had a great dinner with these folks at the JW Marriott there, and the next day I said, well, I'm here. I'm going to take like a 4:00 flight and go home, but I'm going to go onto the floor. There's, someone knows so many people there. I said, I got like 6, I wrote down a list on my phone on the notes thing. And I said, there's 6 different people I want to see, Seth Goldman and just these people that I've known forever. And so I went in the show at 10 o'clock. I used to be able to get into the show at 7 in the morning when I was at WIG. Now I'm just an old man. And so I went in with the peons at 10 o'clock and I went to the 6th, and by 2 o'clock I was out. It was so amazing when I went downstairs into the 5,000 rows, and I go down the first row, and I wasn't specifically coming to see you guys, but I know of the brands that you had. And I walked into this Macy's department store called LA Libations.
23 booths.
It was the most unbelievable, just, and it made me think back to the story that Dino just recanted, that, I knew these guys when they wore suits that were too big for them and they were a little bit too big for school, but I saw your eyes, and I just knew you guys were a class and that you were going to be able to make something happen. And I saw I don't like to use the word Mutt and Jeff or whatever you want to call it, because you're yin and yang, And you just made a tremendous success out of yourselves. And it wasn't without issues and problems and failures and lack of money and scars and all that stuff. But you know what? If you don't have any of those, and you heard a lot of people at Bev Forum talking about the scars that they had and how they got over it. Clayton Christopher's thing with Josh
and
was
Doss were so
just
vulnerable
amazing.
and so real, and like they didn't have to say that stuff.
True.
In front of the entire industry, in
Yeah.
front of every retailer, in
Yeah.
front of everybody. They were so vulnerable, man. It was awesome.
They did
'Cause
a
There
great
are
job.
people we look up to.
But I think the real lesson is how, like, Danny and I focus on paying it forward. Like, I don't go to Expo West without remembering that minute. And, you know, when we met you, we were both probably 35-ish, and we were kids. We considered ourselves kids, right? And now when I talk to kids, I try to give them the Jim Tonkin talk. I'm like, bro, you didn't bring samples? Like, why didn't you have a backpack full of product? Like, why aren't you running around meeting everybody? Like, I try really hard to talk to young entrepreneurs about the value. And Danny does it better than I do. Show up.
Yeah.
Show up. Don't
well,
quit.
it's funny. We didn't really show up that first time. At
No,
Expo
we
West. But now, like, it's
passed through.
ingrained in our employees. Like, it's so funny. Like, people come into my office that work for us, and they're like, "Hey, there's this thing going on. Should I go?" And I look at them,
Why are
and
you
they're like,
asking
"Oh, they're like,
me?
oh yeah. Well, I'll show up. I'll show up.
Will you get more done at home? I don't know.
Yeah.
You tell
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is like, and Danny and I are great at this. So we've got a real young team, you know, people that are in their 20s. And we'll have and we don't have a lot of turnover, but as the team grows, there's new faces. So we'll have an Expo West pep talk about a week before. And it's real clear. It's like, look, you can come and go when you want, but it'll be disappointing if you leave at 10 a.m. on the last day. Like, the show goes until 2.
Yeah.
We've closed a lot of amazing...
3:45 it went till.
Well, we've closed a lot of great stuff at, 3:30.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
when it starts
We're the
winding
last
down.
ones to leave. Dino and I are the last, but out of principle, we're the last ones to leave on the last day. There's, everyone's just ravaging for samples, and everyone's taking down their booze.
Yeah.
We're to the bitter end.
But you know who else is the last one there? Craig Dubinsky's the last one there.
Yeah.
Seth Goldman is the last one
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys that would never go to a meeting without samples.
Or wearing
So
their
true.
branded shirts.
So I
Yeah.
have five pictures from Tuesday with Seth and with different people. We just kept running into each other, and finally we sat down for 30 minutes and had lunch, and we were yapping. But he always had an iced tea.
Always.
Every picture. I mean, he did it with Honest for 20-something years, and now
He's
it's
so low key about it. You don't even know he's doing it.
Oh, I know, because I'm a branding guy too, and I always have some kind of prop. It's really important, particularly when you're on air and wherever you are. You gotta be that person, and I love the fact that you guys did this water. You have your own water, and I've been in the water business for most of my career. But thank you for sharing that story, because I never forgot it either. It's just I have a chronology of things that were important to me where I think I made a difference. And it's a little like a jukebox at my age now. I have all these CD-ROM discs, and I just kind of go through it, and I pull out number 17, and it goes into and then I got the names and the people and and that's a beautiful thing when you get to the point where you've been in a business for 50 years. Starting as a soft drink bottler, and thank God I got out
Go
of that.
back. Tell us how you got into this.
Yeah, the story I could talk for an hour easily, but just the chronology was my dad was in the soft drink business. Before that, my grandfather was a liquor. We owned the Seagram's brand in Northern California all the way up to the Washington border.
Wow.
And owned the distributorship, right? And it was all given to us by the Bronfman family. So, I mean, it was a very nice, tight connection.
Like given to you? Or
No, I mean, they were our partner because they own Seagram's,
Got it.
right? So
they gave you the rights. Got it.
exactly. And so my grandfather was a hell of a salesman. He brought Perrier into the U.S. I mean, many, many years ago to the West Coast. He used to walk in with 3 bottles of Perrier to a bar and put them on the bar. And he said, "You guys have got to try this." And, put 3
That's what Lance Collins does to this day, everywhere he goes.
It's amazing,
Everywhere.
isn't it? I remember the product used to come in these 55-gallon casks with the individual bottles in there wrapped in cotton.
Oh, wow.
That's how they came from Perrier.
Wow.
Feels like Prohibition era
It
thing.
is. I mean, it was
Easy to
like the
sneak
late
it in.
30s. I've seen all sorts of pictures. But anyway, so from the liquor business and wine business as well, it's a kind of a weird story, but the Bronfmans came to my dad and my great uncle, who was my dad's partner, and said, we have a shirt-tail relative of ours that we'd really like to put into the business. And we kind of feel like if you guys are here, you're not going to get along because these people don't really know the business, but they're family. And so my dad and my great uncle said, well, I guess we're out. So in like 68, they lost the whole Seagram's thing.
Wow.
And at that time, there was a gent up in Northern California that had the 7-Up business, and it was a tiny little business, even though 7-Up was, 10 times the size of Sprite and
Small
those things
stuff.
back in those days. They ended up buying the operation. It was the distributorship, right? For
7-Up.
Northern California. 7-Up. We had 7-Up, A&W root beer. We had Frosty root beer. We had Welch's, the entire Welch's
Sunkist?
line.
Did they have Sunkist
No,
like that? No?
Sunkist was Pepsi that was on the other side of the coin. And then we had
RC?
Welch's.
RC? Yeah.
So, and in different places, we had different brands.
Yeah.
You know how the franchise system works, and the world is very different today. But I started going to work for my dad when I was 10 years old. Every summer, every Christmas holiday, he would pay me whatever, $2 an hour, he'd give me you go over into that corner and there's a big dumpster over there, and I want you to take all the old 6-pack carriers that hold 16-ounce bottles that have holes in the bottom or they're dirty and throw them in the garbage. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I started doing.
Yeah.
And at 10 years old, you kind of learn. And then when I wasn't doing that on a weekend, I was carrying 2 bags on the golf course, caddying.
Right.
And so I was learning a lot about golf and learning a little bit about a business.
A lot about made men too, in your
and
caddying.
made men, yes, indeed, and how to cheat and how to swear and all sorts of other things that happen on the golf course, right? So, in a long story, through that process, I went away to private high school and then college and came back and my dad said, "Well, you're coming into the business, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, I'll give it a shot." So I came in for, I guess it was. I told my dad I would do it for a year. Let's see how it goes, right? And I want to be able to, so am I going to go into your office and sit at a small desk and listen to you on the phone and with all your meetings, and within a year I'll know the whole business, right? We have the largest canning facility in the Western United States. Wow. We did all of the product for the military for about 60 brands that went to the Philippines and Guam and Japan and all these places. So it was a big operation. And we had about 450 employees. And so I went through this 7-year training program. I had no idea that's what I was going to have to do. So I went through every department, right? I drove a truck for 3 years. I used to weigh 220 pounds, but it was all muscle. And I worked in the post-mix department. I started 2 companies within our company in the electronic gun dispensing equipment, Electronic Dispensers International, if you know that brand.
Yeah,
they're gone now, but Wonder Bar and all those companies. So I stayed in that business until 1982. And for about a year, I was having these pangs in my stomach from producing millions of cases of soft drinks with all this fucking sugar in it. And I kept trying to rationalize this with my gut, and my gut just would not leave me alone. So in 82, I had a meeting with my dad, and I talked to my mom a couple of times before that because she was kind of my good bolster and a good go-between, when you know how families are. And my dad was a workaholic, tough guy, didn't have much of a sense of humor. And I told him, I said, "Dad, I'm going to leave, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't do this anymore." And he was floored. Wow. So we didn't talk for 3 years.
Wow.
So I left the business and I went to Hawaii. And I was on the beach for 3 weeks, and the Hilton Hawaiian Village, if you know where that is in Oahu.
And do you think it was because you didn't buy into his dream, or because he put 7 years into getting you where you were?
No, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because all of that experience has been part of my spiel.
Yeah, but from his perspective.
Yes, I gave you this opportunity, and now you're shitting on me.
Right.
So for 3 years we didn't talk. So I go to Hawaii, to Honolulu, and I'm on the beach and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with myself.
How old are you now?
32.
Okay.
So I've got a little bit of jingle in my pocket, but not much. And
it's like Danny and I at 35. What the fuck are we going to do?
So I'm soul searching, and I'm thinking about this stuff. And this was way pre-sale and all that. So I mean, if you wanted to use a phone, you go up to the hotel room, right? So I'm laying on the beach, and I took a nap, and I wake up, and there's this gal who's got a towel right next to me. And it was like their beach was huge, and she put a towel right next to me. I'm going, what the hell? So I look over at her.
220 pounds and yoked.
She's blonde and very cute. And so anyway, she starts talking to me, and I said, "What do you do?" And she says, "I own 22 Subway franchises in Minneapolis." And she was like my age. And I'm going, what? How did you get in? One thing led to. So I said, look, if a woman like that can own a huge number of Subways, and I know she graduated in accounting, got an MBA, CPA, and then she opened these things. She was making a fortune. So it was inspirational to me. And so while I'm sitting on the beach, I'm having like probably 5 Budweisers every day, right? Just a chilling, watching the surfers. Yeah. But the other thing I was doing was I was eating potato chips. These goddamn Maui chips, these little greasy bags of Maui chips that were made in Maui in a basement of a 3-story house by a Japanese expat. And after 4 days of eating these chips and probably gaining weight from it, I said, I got to find out how these are made because they're freaking amazing. But they were in a clear bag. So if you left them out in the sun for an hour and a half, they were rancid, right? So I go upstairs, I've had 5 beers, and I get on the phone, and I call the number on the back of the package, and this little girl, Maui chips, answers the phone. And one thing led to another. I got on a puddle jumper. Back then, in the early 80s, they only had these little small planes that were going inter-island.
You and Tom Selleck.
Yeah, exactly. And so I go over and I meet this guy. His name is Dewey Kobayashi, and he's an expat from Japan, and he made these chips. And I spent 3 days with him. And at the end of that time, on a handshake, I said, Dewey, I love what you're doing here. I want to take this back to the mainland, but do it because I had a lot of contract manufacturing experience, big, fast equipment, a lot of money in
I'd be
furniture.
like, I know a lady with 22 Subways.
Exactly.
We're going to put this in Subway.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, the long and the short through this, I built this company called Buffalo Chips, made on the plains of Sacramento. It was a complete joke. But they were russet potatoes with the skin left on, real thick cut. Eventually, I had Laura Scudder's, if you remember them from down here. I had Nally's out of Seattle, the pickle company. They had a chip back then. I had Knutson, the Knutson company. Mm-hmm. I made a bunch of chips for them. So I had all these contract, and they were taking 90% of my line time, and I had 5 to 10% for my little brand, which I was really trying. So I went and got a guy named Frankie Lane. Do you know that name? No. Okay, but you do know the song that made him famous, which was the Rawhide theme.
Okay.
Yes, that's it. And with the so we wrote a song. I hired the songwriter from Dallas, and he wrote the lyrics, and Frankie kind of did the music, and he sang this song called Buffalo, Buffalo Chips, made on the plains of Sacramento. Whack! And we had it on, back then, radio was a big deal. So we had it on all the radio stations in Northern California, then in Nevada, and then Arizona. So the long and the short is we got a lot of traction out of it. And Laura Scudder's came in one day and said, we can't produce this product in LA because of the oil, free-flowing oil that would be contaminated to the crap products that they were making, like Lay's. And so they basically took me out. So that was my first little experience of non-beverage, but in the food space. And I used a lot of the knowledge that I had to do the deal. I bought 2 45-foot fryers and had kind of a semi-automated deal. It was really fun. And then I was looking for a job again, and I got involved in the library. I'm looking through microfiche. Remember the microfiche with those big screens and the dials?
I've done some term papers.
And so I'm reading newspaper headlines, hoping to spark something, or I could find something that I could turn into something. And I noticed that in the state of California, there was a supply chain upside down situation where there was an overabundance of milk, and not that the demand wasn't there at that particular time. They were throwing 60 million fluid pounds of milk down the drain every week.
That was before people knew what whey.
Yeah, totally. So I read that, and then as I'm continuing to go, I happened to see this little article about cheese. And California had the little tiny small cheese companies like Sonoma Cheese and Napa and stuff like that. But they were little tiny players. There were no major players. Everybody was Kraft and all these big companies from around the country. And so this article had a quotation in it, and it was like this and an equal sign. It's 10 pounds of milk makes 1 pound of finished cheese. And the light bulb went off and said, shit, I can take all that milk and turn it into cheese. And be a big player in the state of California. Within 6 months, I was the largest player in the 1 pound brick private label business, selling to Alpha Beta, Albertsons, everybody, all the way up to Washington State and Idaho, Nevada, Arizona.
All private label? Or
all
did you
private.
have
It
your
was
own
called
brand?
Heritage Farms was the brand name.
Wow.
But we did cut and wrap for anybody that wanted product. Colby, Longhorn, Cheddar, all the cheddars, sharp and mild and medium, and Edam and Gouda and all these. It was amazing. So I was in that business for about a year and a half with
It's
a
like
couple
you're
of
slowly
partners.
building nachos. Chips to cheese.
Yes, exactly. We're putting the cheese on the chips. So anyway, I played golf in a tournament down in Ojai with this 72-year-old guy, and I'm like 32, 33. Yeah. And 9 holes were done, and he said, Jimmy, I can't play anymore. Let's go get a drink. And it didn't take much to get me to go have a drink. So we go in the bar, and on a frickin' napkin, this guy's the EVP of Borden's out of Columbus, Ohio. And he said, we want to get back in the state of California because they used to be there years before and they left. And I said, oh, interesting. Long story. We outlined this thing and I'm gone out of the cheese business. So now I'm unemployed again for the 3rd time. And a friend of mine was starting a bank in Northern California. And I was in the same Rotary Club that he was. And he came to me at lunch one day. He sat next to me. He said, Jimmy, what are you doing? And I said, I'm looking for something to do. And he said, I'm starting a bank. And you know everybody in the Bay Area and Sacramento all the way up to Tahoe. And he said, I want to raise $43 million to commercialize the bank for asset base. And I said, okay, how do you do that? And he said, well, we're going to offer 25 to 30 basis points more for savings. So just go to all your friends and get them to move their deposits over, their non-turning accounts, but just their float, if you will, into my bank, so I can get the asset base ratios right, and we can fire this thing up. Took me about 2.5 months, and I raised the money.
Wow!
And
how much?
$43 million.
Wow!
And so he said, "Okay, now I'm going to teach you the banking business." So I don't know if you guys know anything about banking, but all I knew how to do in those days was write checks and borrow money. I was really good at that. And working in big businesses where, particularly in the soft drink business, where it was a license to print money, almost like a beer distributorship today, right? So I said, yeah, I want to learn how to adjudicate a risk and how credit administration is done on the banking side and how to get a loan and what they look at and what's collateral and blah, blah, blah. So I was with him for 3 years. And we built from a single branch bank called Meridian National Bank to 19 branches in Northern California. And we sold out to a company called First Interstate. You may remember that bank. And 2 months after we sold to them, Wells Fargo bought them.
Wow.
So here I am with a bunch of stock options, and I'm in the chairman's office at Wells Fargo. And he says, Jimmy, what do you want to do? And the guy who brought me in was gone, retired. He was a double PhD from Harvard.
Wow.
And so I couldn't have had a better mentor. And I said, the one thing I don't want to do is be a banker. So I was working in the holding company. If you remember, I used to have a lot of holding, and that's where they put all the non-banking things. So I became a general contractor to build all these offices for the bank. Right. And so I learned a lot about building, commercial building and all this. So it was just more shit I was putting in my head.
Dude, I had no idea about any of this.
So then
He's had like 5 careers.
And then in
He's not even 40 yet.
well, 1987, whatever I would have been, I was born in 51. So you do the math. I think I was 36. So I was looking for something to do. And that's when I said, I really miss the beverage business. And I said, I can't go back into that because they're still producing millions of cases of this shit and nobody's doing anything different. So I said, I'm going to hang out a consulting shingle and try to figure out a way to get traditional soft drinks to do something different, find a way to take the sugar out, find a way to get rid of some of these others.
For your time.
Well, yes, it was, but it was this. My gut was telling me that was the right thing to do. Yeah. So I really kind of became pretty healthy, and I stopped eating a lot. I don't use sugar on anything, very little salt on anything. And I stayed true to that. It took me about 2 years before I built up enough clientele that I wasn't using my savings.
Was this called Healthy Brand Builders?
No, back then it was just Tonkin Consulting.
Okay.
Very, very good name. It was very creative, and I used a lot of brain power to come up with that.
Did you focus group that? Or?
No, I didn't. I actually just did it one night in my sleep, and I had the cards made, and so I had that for 5 to 7 years, and then I said I have to be something more than my stupid name. And so, although my grandfather always told me this was one of his watchwords: keep a good name, Jimmy. And I've never forgotten that and you guys know, once you fuck yourself up with a big mistake or a lie or a whatever,
Your reputation's
you're done. You're done. And it's so hard to come back.
Yeah.
So I've always worked my whole life. I've never been sued. I've never, I've been on the wrong side of deals before, and I've been hurt financially, but I've never done anything that was crossing the line, not even much in the yellow zone except my tax return. So... Wait, is this on?
Yeah.
So now I don't care because I'm on fixed income, right? So anyway, the long and the short is that 38 years of building brands, and we commercialized over 2,000 brands.
Where did you get the name Healthy Brand Builders?
Yeah, it was like 1988.
Okay.
Yeah, and
long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, and I, it was really funny because I was really hell-bent on kind of doing my own thing and not having a big empire. I mean, I had 400 employees in the soft drink business, and I never wanted to do that again. But slowly but surely, I started doing business with people that I became really friendly with. I trusted them. They had pedigree, CPAs, lawyers, really top-notch people in the marketing and sales world. So I could basically come in and pick up a piece of business, and then if they didn't have a VP of sales, I could fractionalize that position because I had a guy that could do 4 brands, right? And then same thing with a marketing CMO type. I did, then I started building relationships with bankers. Private equity players, and I traveled all over the country and really started saying, look, I'm going to be doing some fundraising, and you need to know who I am, and I'm going to bring you some shit, and a little like I do with you guys. I haven't asked you for money yet, but maybe that's coming. So anyway, that's really the story, and the you guys know my brand history. I've been very fortunate, starting kind of at the beginning with Arnold Palmer Tea was a gigantic hit for us, and the brand is still doing $1.7 billion, sorry, and growing.
Wow.
So as a golfer, I played high school and college golf, and Arnold Palmer was my idol. And I really wasn't a fan of Jack Nicklaus. I liked Gary Player and stuff, but Arnie was
He's the guy.
So when a friend of mine who became my partner called and said, look, I belong to Bay Hill, and we want to come up with a finished beverage, Arnold Palmer, because they're making Arnold Palmers in golf courses and hotels and everywhere else all over the place with half lemonade and half called half and half, right? Half lemonade and half iced tea. But we want to make it consistent, which of course we all know is that's the end game. So we did it. We took it to Mr. Palmer, and I'll never forget sitting in his office, 4 of us on one side, ice cream guys and me. And Mr. Palmer's on the other side of the table, and his caddy, Corey, was there. And we pushed across, like a 32-ounce plastic jug of finished product. And he tried it, and he's continuing to talk, right? He's sipping, and he's continuing. So we're waiting for him to say, wow, that is amazing. Well, he eventually kind of did.
Wow.
And he said, the only thing I'm going to tell you if I get in business with you guys is I already have like 13 endorsements. I make $12-14 million every January for doing nothing but saying John Deere is a great tractor. Right. Or Valvoline is a really good motor oil.
Easy to say the truth.
So true. So he said, if we're going to do this and it's going to say Arnold Palmer half and half with my signature on it, this is the first thing that I've ever done with my name on it, and do not fuck it up.
Right.
So there's the keep a good name thing,
yes.
Right? And realize Arnie didn't make a lot of money playing golf in his career. He just was a great golfer. He made his money after his golf career.
Yeah, well, the money wasn't the same in sports in general.
Totally,
It
wasn't.
Even
So
like football players.
So this guy was so real and so amazing. I have a picture on my phone sitting across from him 3 months before he died.
Wow.
And it was a real heartfelt, tearing kind of thing. He had dementia. He just really kind of went off the deep end of it. But he is an icon that will always be remembered in the golf world and in the sports world.
And you made some money.
Yeah, well, it was a group of us, and actually Arizona Iced Tea, we went to them. I went to Don, and he didn't know who Arnold Palmer was. Is that a story?
Wow.
I could tell you.
Considering how much golf that guy probably plays?
He doesn't play any golf.
Oh, really?
No, Ferolito was the golfer.
Oh, his partner owns the course, yeah.
So it was such a crack up. I could tell you another story about, remember when Arizona did Shaq?
Yes.
That Shaq Cola?
Yeah, of course.
So Shaq goes to his office, and Shaq is 7'4" or 2 or whatever. Well, the archway to the door was 6'8".
Yeah.
And so I'm sure Shaq is used to ducking when he goes into places, or he's going to smack his head, right?
Yeah.
So he walks in. He went to the bathroom, and his agent, who's another black fella, but he's only like 6 feet tall, so he's a midget, right, or a little person, next to Shaq. And he's sitting at the table, and Don's conference room is attached to his office.
Yeah, I've heard about that conference room. I've heard it's pretty special
It's
place.
pretty special. So he comes out, and he walks over to this guy, and he shakes his hand, and he said, "Shaq, it is so great to meet you."
Oh,
he
my
had no
God.
freaking idea. And right at that time, the door opens, and Shaq comes flying underneath the thing and comes over to Don and shakes his hand. I have a million stories like that. That's why I said we could sit here and talk for hours, but the most important thing that I could give back to you guys for this gracious opportunity to speak on your podcast, and thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Is that life is full of twists and turns and fun and sadness and learnings and all of that stuff, and family and business. And you heard the guys on the podium on your stage the last couple of days talking about the life balance. And Chris Hunter said one thing, and of course I know Chris pretty well, and I don't know if you know the story between the two of us, but Chris said, he doesn't really believe in work and family. It's just life.
Yep.
And one day you're working your ass off and you're gone 20 hours, and the next Saturday you're playing football and everything with your 3 kids, and then you have a nice dinner with your wife. And that's the ebb and flow of the world. And you guys know that.
I agree with it, man. When people say balance, like work-life balance, there's no such thing as balance. Like
integration.
It's work-life integration. I mean, it's life.
Yeah.
Chris nailed it. I mean, so true.
It's amazing. And I think people that figure that out, like some of those heartfelt founders and very successful business guys who I've watched their careers, and I know them, and I feel blessed to be in this business. The retirement thing, back to the beginning question you asked, to close that loop, that was one of the big things that I kind of feared is, when you're in the middle of things, you don't really realize it until you step out.
Right.
And I was always ready for retirement. My golf game suffered for many years because I always played in corporate events. And so you said, hey, come to LA and let's go out to my club and we'll play. And I did that. So 20 times a year, you can't play golf like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I was a competitive golfer.
You can't be good unless you play.
You can't. There's just no way to get around it.
Yeah.
So I was playing golf with a senior pro the other day, a guy named Michael Allen. I don't know if you remember him. Super nice guy. And what a game he still has at 68. And we were yapping on the golf course about that, and he did pretty well. He made good money while he was on the tour, and he's made good money on the senior tour. He's quote semi-retired now, so he can only play 11 events a year. He has to pick where he goes. Right? He doesn't need the money, but he was afraid when he left. He was sharing with me that he said, "God, when I get off the senior tour, man, I'm afraid." So. I said, yeah, I went through that same process, but it only took me a very short period of time and this blessing of COVID that let me Zoom for, 8-10 months, that I was able to just sit back and let it happen. And then boom, by 2021, I was looking around to who I could play golf with. I hooked up with 32 guys at Talking Stick, which is an amazing 218
Tony
hole.
Milano will play with you whenever
Tony
you want.
plays with me all the time. And he's a good stick, very competitive guy. He played high school football, a little in college, and so he's incredible athlete still to this day. And I'm getting him hooked up now. I'm getting him into a club that he's out on the other side of town from me, so we don't even really communicate because the west side of, you've probably heard, the west side of Phoenix is like downtown LA.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, if you live in Scottsdale, you don't go to that side of town. Right? I'm not coming over there.
Other side of the track.
Other side of the tracks.
So, Jim, another through line with our relationship I was just thinking about is ZICO.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. So we got involved with ZICO when it was like $1.5–2 million in revenue. Mm-hmm. Derek Van Rensburg at Coke said, this guy needs your help. I'm talking about Rampolla.
Yeah.
And so that was transformational for our company because it was the first brand that gave us equity for services. Mm-hmm. And obviously that exited to the Coca-Cola company. How did you get involved with ZICO?
Well, that's a quick story. Maura Rampolla, Mark and Maura are no longer together, and I'm still, Maura's very much part of my family. And so when I came over to your lovely event the last 2 days, I knew I was going to see Mark because we are pretty close still.
Is he there? I didn't even see him.
Yeah, he came for 10 minutes because the ground force had a meeting on Wednesday, so he had to prepare for it. And he's a little bit of an overachiever. So I called Maura and I said, can you come over to the West Drift Hotel? Do you know where that is? And she said, yes. It used to be a Marriott, right? Yeah, that's it. So she said, yes. And it took us 5 text messages to find the right time. She's so busy. To come over. So she came over at 4:30 on Wednesday afternoon. And I spent an hour and a half with her just yapping about everything. And we recalled the story of how we actually first met. And she remembered everything. And it was very meaningful to her. I did not even know that at the time. She shared that with me at
Dude, you're like pivotal in a lot of people's stories and don't even know it.
Crazy. It's just, I mean, it's not
that's
like...
a testament to you, like connecting people, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of what Danny does, but you've been connecting people a long time.
I have been doing it for a lot of years. I love doing it. Nothing gives me more satisfaction than to put A together with B. I did it twice already this morning. So, and I hope I can continue to keep doing that.
Did it with Icelandic and Anheuser-Busch.
Yes, indeed.
Wow.
So that story real quickly. I remember I said earlier that I used to get onto the show floor at Expo West early because I was very close friends with the president and the number 2 guy at New Hope. We were personal friends, and they always gave me all these amazing things, a nice suite in the Hilton and blah, blah, blah. So I go in, and it's 8:30 in the morning, and the show doesn't open until 10. And I'm flying down every aisle. I start in the supplement and the building A, and I come whipping through there. And that's when you find out who the sharp people are, because they're in their booth. They're getting all their business cards put together, all their point of sale material. They got frozen over here. They got refrigerated here. They got their backdrop going. The ZOA sign is on. So I got to like almost the end of Hall B before I went into Hall C. And I got halfway down an aisle, and I could see this white, blue and white, kind of nondescript but incredibly beautifully laid out booth. And I kept looking at stuff, but I kept on looking, and I finally got down to their booth. And Mark and Maura are sitting on chairs behind a little cooler that had their 11-ounce brick ZICO, just pure coconut water, no flavor, nothing, sitting in there. And Maura was so cute, and I sat on the front of their booth.
Okay.
And I started my introduction, and I just said, "You guys don't know me from Adam, and I just want to tell you, I have OCD, and I never knew what that was, but I'm a neatnik, and everything in my life is in its place, and that's just how I roll." And I said, "I am in love with your booth, and I don't know who did your logo, but I want to meet that person." And Mark says it was my sister. So Mary Beth Rampola, shout out to you, sweetie. I got to be really good friends with her, and she did all the design work. She did the booth and everything. And it was the most beautiful, simplistic,
beautiful brand
layout that I had seen in a long time. And so 45 minutes, I'm talking to them. I didn't care if I saw anyone else. And at the end of 45 minutes, Mark's peppering me with questions. Who are you? What brands do you have? And blah, blah, blah. And so I finally take out my business card, and I put it on their right on top of their see-through refrigerator. Mm-hmm. And I said, "You really still don't know who I am, but someday you're going to form a board if your company's successful, and I want to be on it." And I said, "You call me anytime." So this is the first show in 2003 when Mark first came out.
Wow.
So about 3 months later, I get a telephone call. "Mr. Tonkin, this is Mark Rampola." I said, "Who's Mr. Tonkin? Nobody calls me that." So he said, "Oh, well, I didn't know if you'd remember me." And I said, "Your name went right on the top of my to-do list, and I've been waiting for this telephone call." We talked 8 or 9 times in a year. He would pick my brain about distribution, about what stores should I be in, how about the pricing strategy, and one thing after another.
You gotta believe in it to give that much of your time to just a guy.
Never charged him a nickel.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so finally, at the end of that year, he said, "Jim, remember when you told me that I was probably going to have to form a board? Well, I just raised some money, and I'm still working on this, and I'm trying to get out to California because I'm about ready to lose my home in New Jersey." And I mean, it was a nightmare. And he said, "I want you to be my first board member." And I said, "Oh, awesome, Mark. Where do we meet?" One thing led to another. We put the deal together, became an investor. And the rest was history. And I was Mark's right-hand guy through the whole process.
Yep, you were.
Eventually, dropped off the board, but I knew everybody in the company, and I've met so many wonderful people that have spun out of ZICO over the years, to as late as Tom Larson, who took care of it before we sold it. So, I mean, during the Coke transition.
Yep.
And then we just bought the brand back. So that's a crazy thing when you sell something for over $200 million to a large Fortune 100 company, and then they completely fuck it up.
Yeah.
You heard that, Coca-Cola. But they were one
You
of...
are retired. You can say that.
Yeah,
now.
200 brands. And it's really interesting. That's a whole nother story. It's a great thing to be able to see a company that big take stock of themselves and say, we have 685 brands around the globe, right? And we can get rid of 200 tomorrow, so we could focus a little better and maybe do a better job with these brands. It was a very smart move on their part. So
Painful though.
Painful
for us, Dino and I. It was painful for Aloglow. Like,
yes,
really, really painful when that happened.
Yeah.
Like, devastating.
Yeah.
Painful for Seth.
Very painful. But look at what he has done.
Yeah.
Here you go, bud.
Yeah.
Where's the camera?
I mean, it's so funny. It's like, and I think this was on one of the panels at Beverage Forum. Is like, these bad things sometimes become the best thing that ever happened to you. Right. Like, I mean, Aloglow was the first brand we ever created, and we were all in on it.
Do you remember I was in the aloe business too?
Yeah.
I had two brands.
Well, we
Aloe
thought for
Breeze
sure
and
aloe vera is going to be the next coconut water.
Yeah.
We really believe that,
Yeah.
and we, Dino was all in.
It kind of was.
Yeah.
The coconut water kind of did this and that.
Yeah.
And aloe kind of did this and that.
It's back
kind
now.
of was.
It's back now.
It's still a very. I mean,
Vita Coco had huge earnings yesterday. It was,
really?
Oh yeah.
From
coconut water. It
coconut water.
Plateaued, and now
it's on its way.
But I think it's so interesting because, look at Mark. Now he's got ZICO back. He's got his baby back.
Yeah.
And
actually the transition, Danny, that he made after. So here's the deal between the two of us. I was the emotionally connected cow catcher, and Mark is more the pragmatist.
Yes.
And it's one of my business partners now, Aaron Enrico, who you probably know, whose father was chairman and CEO of Pepsi.
Right.
He's one of my dearest friends, and we were in 5 or 6 deals together still. He's the pragmatist in when we go to see somebody to look at a brand or whatever. He comes at everything from the financial statement. I want to look at how much money do you have in the bank today.
you're like, but they have a beautiful booth.
So those are the two extremes
Yeah.
and I think of you guys because I think of him as the finance guy and you the cow catcher. I mean, sorry for the expressions, because
You're not wrong.
You guys are worth a lot more than that. But that's how I look at our relationship. And so I had the same relationship with Mark, and he was a polished MBA, and he was running a division of international paper in Central America, and he was a dual linguist, and all this stuff, and then I got to meet Maura, and we just all became this big happy family. But it was the way we approached business was very similar to that. I was always the guy that was, no, let's get a new shirt made, and the logo needs to be over here, and I'm all about the branding shit. And Mark is, no, we got to get to this store, and I've got to have the thing built. And so
it's so funny that you say that, because it's real right now. So like Beverage Forum, I want to pour so much money into the production, and Dino's like, dude, like, we
don't have it.
He's like, no one's gonna remember the big sign out front. I'm like,
they did.
I think they will.
They did too.
But it's a great thing though, because I would spend everything, but he doesn't let me.
I try and channel my inner Lance Collins. I try and remind him we're on a profit mission.
Yeah, he's famous for that statement, and it's so true. But Dino and I had breakfast together this morning, and
thank you for that, by the way. On you, I appreciate it.
At breakfast, we actually were talking about the show and how great it was, and I asked who did your production. And he told me the company, and I said, don't ever get rid of those guys, because the video work and the seamless, I watched you any number of times. I wasn't in there that often, but there were certain people I wanted to see, and I loved your suits and everything. You're such an icon.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, let's stay on that topic.
Yeah. So, but
Which jacket did you like?
It was. I mean, the plaid suit was just off the rails. I just thought. Now, you wouldn't have worn that when you were a little heavier, but you looked great in it.
I probably would have. I just would have looked terrible.
It was just. Was your wife one that kind of helped you with that, or is
My
that?
wife dresses me. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Yeah, you have to have that behind every successful man. So the long and the short with where were we with the Rampolla story?
We're talking about
No, you were talking about Beverage Forum.
Beverage Forum. So I've spoke at so many events around the world, and I've seen the production faux pas, and I've seen really good production stuff, and I could not believe how seamless you were from the podium. You'd be talking, you'd give a question to somebody, and somebody would hand it back to you, and they're going, "What? This might be a good time to show the video." Boom, the video shows, and the music is pounding, and it's like the cues were so well done, and it takes a good production company to be able to ham and egg with you and know your spiel and when you're going to quit and when they come up.
So we had them year one, and right afterwards, I'm like, I want to use that same production company. Dino's like, let's see what everybody else costs, and I'm like, no. But we went back with them, and they are really
after
good.
we saw what everyone else cost, we're like, okay, this is market.
Yeah,
they're really good.
Yeah.
They're really good. But Christine also, like, she
on your staff.
She works with us for us, and she had that thing so dialed in. And Jessica, who, like,
I loved it when you said from your closing remarks yesterday, you were thanking the sponsors and different, and I have to thank Christine because she ran the show, and people would come up to me constantly and to Dino, no, go talk to Christine. She knows where it's buried. This is
so you weren't there year one. I promoted her on stage. She didn't know it. He didn't know it. I always ask Dino permission before I do anything like that. I'm like, no way. So the year one ran so smooth. I said, Christine, get up here. This is our director of experience. Not anymore. She looks at me and I go, you're now our vice president. And the crowd went crazy.
That's
but yeah,
great.
she's
the best part is then the next day, Danny's like, so what are we going to do for her? Like, what's the package? We promoted her yesterday. And
she gets 2 periods now. One after V, one after P.
I looked at him and I go, well, I don't know, Danny, what did you have in mind when you announced it?
So one thing I wanted to say before we kind of walk, okay, you guys have got to get back to work, and I don't care about that shit. Is I'm so proud of what you did with putting this deal together with Michael Bellis, who I've known my whole life too, and he was so aggrandizing of both of you, and he felt like he couldn't have sold the company to better people, and I've told you both that privately, and I'm doing it online now. So I think the feeling I had from the show the last couple of days was transformational, and what you guys have been able to do with your reputations and your hard work and your business acumen is to be able to take a show that was very tired and very old. I mean, I spoke at it maybe 10 times in 30 years, and I hadn't been back in at least 10 or 12 years because it was a boring.
No one else had either.
It was a boring show.
Yeah.
And I would always text people, say, you going? And Jerry Kamush was, yeah, I have to go. But I mean, most people, they just gave it up. It's a little like I think I asked you guys before if you know Richard Hall, who bought Beverage Digest, right? And he acquired Dwayne. Yeah. I forgot Dwayne's last name. Stafford, yeah. So Dwayne went with him, and that is a very interesting one-day soiree. But it's really just kind of all the mucky mucks in Goldman Sachs, the suits, who are really looking for the next deal, and they want to know about public company activity and blah 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 blah. So again, an uninteresting. I spoke there a couple of times. John Bello and I did a ham and egg thing one time. It was very funny. Anyway, kudos to you guys for doing this. I just see big things on the horizon. And I mentioned to Dino this morning and you yesterday privately that whatever I can do to help you in Europe or anywhere else, because I think you should go to Asia too. I spent a lot of time in Asia.
So we've committed to Europe. We've committed to Latin America. We're doing that in February in Miami, which is the capital of
Yes, it certainly is.
We haven't thought about Asia yet, though.
Yeah. Well, one thing at a time, you know, and maybe they'll come to you because I know the Japanese would eat this up. The South Koreans, Thailanders, they would all be there. And there's huge companies over there.
We could go as far as Hawaii. Have them meet us in Hawaii.
Let's do it in Hawaii.
We'll have a party at my place. Okay?
Party at Jim's house in Maui.
Indeed. So the end of this thing is you've been so gracious, and I don't want to take any more of your time. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Please, man. We have so many more stories.
There are a lot of stories, a lot of brand things that we've been through together.
It was great to hear about ZICO, but I want to hear about Jan and Christian. Like that's a story I want to hear for the next time.
That one is a good. There's some good content there.
Yeah, I'll close with one quick story with them. I didn't know them that well, but I kind of managed their brand for 2 years. My company did when they first came here, and we were building basically in Whole Foods, and it was just
This is Icelandic Glacial for the audience.
Well,
yeah,
it's how we met you. Like Danny likes to talk about being employee number 1 and 2,
Yeah.
but you were like employee number negative.
I really
1,
wasn't an
negative
employee.
5.
I was
you were
an
doing the
outsourced.
work.
Yes, I was. Yeah. So anyway, it was a labor of love because I was very involved in Fiji water when they first came to the U.S. too. So I really understood the high-end water business and particularly imports. So Evian was very vulnerable at that time, and I was trying to explain to Jan and Christian, who didn't know a goddamn thing about the beverage business. Jan is a wheeler dealer. He was a kind of a magnet in the media world. He owned the newspapers and the radio stations.
He distributed
agencies.
my movie. That's how I met him.
Oh, he
He distributed my.
I didn't know.
Disney used him as their distributor in Iceland,
how
and
funny.
my Disney movie Goal. He was the distributor. That's how I met him.
Oh my God, I didn't know
And
that story.
so everybody in the movie business knows me as the Coca-Cola guy.
Yes, yeah.
That pulled the Adidas deal off. So he was like stalking me, and we met up at the Cannes Film Festival. But it's so interesting because he is still a wheeler dealer. I mean,
I think he's about my age. I think he looks older, but that's because he hangs around with Keith Richards, who's been dead for 12 years and nobody told him.
I think he's living a little faster lifestyle than you too.
Oh, probably, yeah. If I wasn't married, I'd be living the same lifestyle, believe me. So anyway, Jan and Christian, after 2 years, we had a meeting up in Reykjavik, and I said, I just love your brand, and the plant really needs some work because it's building.
It was a little pilot plant.
It was a very small plant.
We saw
Not much bigger than this room.
Yeah. And I said, I don't think you guys have the chops for this. I don't know if you want to put the kind of money into it that it's going to take to build this brand and to make it a household name. But let me tell you how much money Fiji put into their brand. And they're going, yeah, you're probably right. And I said, well, I have an idea. If you will give me the license to make some telephone calls, if I can do some spade work and find out who doesn't have a high-end bottled water that has maybe a distribution system, and sometimes I've got this in the back of my mind. I didn't want to tell them anything.
Yeah.
And so they said, yeah, do what you, whatever. So I go back to the States, and within a week, I made a telephone call to the 8th floor in St. Louis to that company that used to be family-owned, a lot of Eagles in it. And I get Augie Four on the phone, and I said, look, I'd like to send you some product.
Did you know him? Or
Well, I'd met him before, but we weren't personal friends. My wife actually knows her college roommate dated
so
Augie
you could
for
get
a
to
long
him,
time.
but you didn't know him.
No,
That's
not
amazing.
really.
Wow.
So, well, I had some friends who were the head of sales, Tony, forgot his name.
Hunter.
Tony Short.
Oh, Tony Short.
So Tony Short, I knew
Tony
Tony.
Bunch-
I never get one. I'm
And then-
excited when I got one.
Who was the head of distribution? John
Glick.
Okay, I got the John, you got the Glick.
Rain
Right on,
Man.
brother. See, that's
Rain
what
Man.
it takes, teamwork.
Yeah.
So
That was foundational in my life, the Anheuser-Busch years.
So those two guys, I talked to them as well because Augie told me to talk to them.
Yeah.
So I got to, we had a very frank conversation, and they said, look, yes, we've been trying to make a Bud water, but the marketing department doesn't want to have anything to do with it.
Isn't that called Hop Water now?
Nobody's going to buy Bud water, right? Yeah. So I said, I agree, but I have a bottle of water, by the way, that I'd like to send to you. So I sent a 56 case pallet to the 8th floor. Wow. Took it up in the elevator. Within 2 days, they were all gone, every case.
Oh, yeah.
So,
by the way, the best water. It is the best water.
It's so much better than Fiji.
The best bottle.
By the way, I know. Well, so again, we'll get together again. I can tell you my Fiji stories. But I got this really good feeling when I talked to Tony and John that they really liked the product, and they didn't have a water. And so I said, I think there's something here. So I call Jan and Christian. I get them on the phone. And I said, can you guys come down to St. Louis? And they said, what's in St. Louis? And I said, this company called Anheuser-Busch. And they went, who is that? And so I said, well, it's a company that could become a partner of ours, and they have an amazing distribution system in the beer space all over the United States. And they were family run at the time, everybody was still in the business. And so, long story, they come down. We take a hotel room in the Westin there attached to the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And we end up going over to the office, and we go into the conference room, which is about 8 times longer than your desk here. and we're sitting there. The three of us are on one side, and this was similar to how we sold ZICO to Coke. It was our attorney from New Jersey, Mark, and me, and 11 attorneys.
Yeah.
On the Coke side.
Sure.
So it was exactly the same thing.
Only 11?
So yeah, there were 11. Brian Perry led the deal. So anyway, we were pretty much overpowered because they had 2 Goldman Sachs internal audit analysts that were on their payroll. Mm-hmm. They had John and Tony and Augie and the 3 or 4 other people whose names are really not.
John's sharp too. I like John a lot. John tried to sell Danny and I some brands, and I was like, I see you coming, John. Nice. No thanks.
So we're in this 4-hour meeting, and I'm seeing legs shake on the other side of the table. I'm seeing Tony and John kind of look at each other numerous times, and everything we were saying, Jan is a good storyteller.
Yes.
And so by the end of this meeting, we're going, well, we should get together and let's have another meeting. We'll send you some more water. Let us know what you want to do. Within 10 days, we got a call back, and the Goldman Sachs guys were engaged now. And so they, we started, I kind of told them what I thought we needed in the business, and it's exactly what AB put into the business. So it was a very fortuitous meeting.
It was a lot for pre-revenue.
It was $38 million.
$38 million pre-revenue.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't pre-revenue, but it was small revenue because it was.
They had some revenue in Iceland.
Yeah, but we had some Whole Foods and some of that stuff in the U.S., but it was still small potatoes, right? It's only natural food stores and stuff.
Yeah, no, but they had proved they didn't improve the concept, but they proved their ability to execute.
Totally.
They were getting product on shelf, things like that.
Beautiful outside box. Their package was gorgeous.
But you said it really well. It wasn't the money that they deserved because their size didn't deserve that much money. It was the money they needed.
Exactly.
And that's what unlocked all the value creation outside of Reykjavik with the factory and everything else. I mean, they built a gorgeous
facility,
breathtaking, ultra modern, high speed facility in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like it might have been easier to build it on Mars.
It's Thorflishoken. Can you guys say that?
Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, I know. It's a fishing port. I mean, and
it
I was
Jan's hometown.
Right. I was worried about that because the borehole is not very far from the harbor there, and I'm thinking to myself, what fish are shitting in the water here and everything. But it was on the effluent side, so it didn't really matter, right? 23 million acre feet go through that effluent every single day. It's enough water to satisfy or satiate the world's need for water.
Yeah.
Now, the best part is I remember being there and I'm watching a guy hose down the loading dock, and Jan looks at me and goes, "That's Icelandic Glacial water we're using." He goes, "That's $3 a liter in the U.S." And I'm like, all the cost, I guess, is packaging and distribution. The water's free.
Totally. That's so true. I mean, the water went out no matter what. And that borehole, do you guys know how they got the water business? Jan won it in a poker tournament.
Of course he did. Of course he did.
That's like Lance's golf putt.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly like his putt.
Yeah.
He got a birdie and he got 1,000 Subway stores. So that's how he was playing cards with somebody, and the guy didn't have money. And he said, "Well, I've got this thing that I was going to do something with. I built this 1,000-foot borehole into an aquifer, and it's just sitting there. It's got a little house over the top of it." And Jan said, "Okay, I'll take it." He's
a great entrepreneur, and he has been raising money. He just has not stopped raising ever since.
No.
I mean, that cap table, I can't imagine.
It's craziness. But there's been a lot of people that have spun off of it too. People buying out.
Are you still on it, or are you spin off it?
I'm not involved anymore. Yeah. I got my. Although Christian still owes me some money personally, but I may never see that.
So we were never on it. That's why we left.
Really?
Yeah, we were told we were going to be on it.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, they're pretty good at that. They're pretty good at they know they got the shell game down very nicely.
Well, and after everybody got canned, I didn't think they'd have a future. The fact that Jan and Christian have kept putting coal in that furnace for 16 more years is a testament. And Reza's kept that thing alive.
Reza is really the reason
real
why the brand is.
I've got a lot of respect for Reza.
Sadowski's on the board now.
So they wanted me to come onto the board again. So when we were at Expo, Ken comes up to me and he said, "I'm being interviewed by Reza." And I said, "For what?" He said, "To go onto their board." And I got like my eyes started twitching because Reza had talked to me about, Jan had talked to me because I went to a Rolling Stones concert with him. Yeah. And so, anyway, long story.
I'd love to be on that board. I think that would be
it's crazy. So I sat at a lot of business meetings with Jan,
just for the show,
being the executive chairman. And they were pretty unorthodox, I got to tell you.
Yes. You want to be an advisor. You don't want to be a fiduciary.
Yeah.
So Christian, I have to say, I have to give him a lot of kudos because he's a computer nerd, really.
Yeah.
And
the greatest guy.
He is just the sweetest guy. I've always called him Chris, and I don't know anybody else that calls him that, but he's always let me do it. And his kids are so damn cute, those towhead blondes, and Helga, and the whole family is just. They're just an amazing family, and he's built this Helix vodka brand, and he got it into Marriott and a bunch of other places, and I must get 15 Instagram posts of people making love with a Helix vodka. I mean, it's just crazy stuff that they do, but it's working.
Dino and I, not for this podcast or any podcast, Dino and I used to drink back then a lot. And we have some stories with Christian.
Oh God, yeah. Well, he loves to put him back, and I think his beard is almost to the table.
Yeah,
now he goes up and up.
I
and
love
down.
Christian.
He looks,
John.
Yeah, he reminds me. Yeah, exactly. He reminds me of the Viking. I mean, he really looks. And I mean, that's his background and everything. But he really became that. Because he was pretty clean cut when I was first working with him at Icelandic. And I don't know if it was it's shoulder length. But I used to go to London all the time, and because he had a computer, he had one of before Uber, and delivery of food. He had a food company. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And so I used to go over. That's where I used to have meetings. I'd fly over, and we'd have the meetings in the Uber building, whatever it was called. I can't remember the name of the building. Dine 911, Dine 11, or whatever. And he was running around constantly saying, "Hey, get that fish over to this guy's house." And Jim, let's look at doing this. It was like the most insane
great
environment.
Entrepreneurs.
Yeah. It was great.
Well,
so anyway,
Jim, this has been amazing, man. We could do this all day long. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for everything you've done for us. We appreciate it. Let's do this again.
Yeah, for sure. No, there's like, I think a lot of this show or whatever you want to call it is about the stories, because the stories are so good. They're so like rich and textured, and these themes repeat themselves, right? This business is secular.
It is.
So it's great to tap into that wealth of knowledge and let people hear the stories.
Thank you, guys. I'm so appreciative of our relationship and how nice you've always been to me, and I'm so happy for your success.
Awesome,
so
man.
Continue.
Let's play some golf.
Right on, brother. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
That was cool, man.
Oh, that was really fun.
Awesome, man. So fun.
I figured I could throw a few things that you guys never heard before.
Dude, I had no idea you had that many careers.